been an individual contributor for over 16 years, somebody who's been in sales forever, someone who's been an account executive, somebody who's worked with deals of multiple sizes. We have Salman, who's currently the strategic AE at Asana. Salman, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. I see that you're already doing more of a walk the talk kind of an approach today.
I am. First of all, Anirudh, thank you so much for having me join. It's a pleasure. Great to be on here. And yeah, I'm going for a nice walk in my neighborhood here. It's a little cold here in Toronto, Canada. I got my big puffy jacket on, but yeah, it's good to get some fresh air in the morning. So thank you.
Amazing. Salman, so first things first, right? Usually anybody who I talk to, or even take me for an example, I would definitely, my passion lies towards going into a leadership role at some point, right? A VP of sales, CRO, whatever, the usual trajectory. But over 16 years as an individual contributor, I'm sure there's a reason behind this, right? What's your why? Why would you want to stick as an AE?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anirudh. So a couple of reasons. Number one is earlier in my sales career, probably in my first 2 or 3 years, I had specific goals I had in mind. One of those goals was I wanted to sell to the big banks in Canada. I wanted to sell to the biggest organizations in the country that typically are very innovative. And I knew to get there would take some time. And there was a lot of bumps on that road. I was laid off earlier in my career. I was put on a PIP earlier in my career. I went through ups, I went through downs, just like every other seller does. But I still had that mindset of, hey, I want to cover the big banks. It took me over 10 years, starting from an SDR at IBM in 2006 to cover the big banks at Salesforce and a couple other companies. And I was able to get that opportunity. And I had a specific goal to close some large deals. I was able to do that. And, in fairness, yes, I did have a couple of opportunities to move into leadership. There's a couple other stories behind that, but I really wanted to make sure I had the experience to work on complex deals, close those larger deals. And I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity. And then the second part of the reason is, as you know, I'm a family guy. And, growing up, I was actually born and raised in Western Canada, in a small town in northern Alberta, where there wasn't much of a diversity. And I was one of 3 boys. And my mom was a single mom at that point in time. And for several years, she was working at pizza shops, at donut shops, earning minimum wage, supporting 3 boys, all below the age of 10. And I don't know how she put food on the table. Wow. And for me, it's important for me to, ensure that I'm supporting my family. I got 3 girls. I got a beautiful wife. I'm a sole income owner, and I want to make sure I'm giving back. And just the last part of that answer is that, what's funny is that my mom wanted, and anybody who's in the South Asian region can probably understand this, or South Asian family. My mom wanted me to become a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. But I didn't. Yeah, it resonates with you, I'm sure. But I didn't want that. I wanted to get into sales because I had all these sales jobs during part-time school and university. So that's my why.
That's amazing. I think that's one of the most beautiful stories I've heard, Salman. You said you wanted to work with the big banks, and you're here today, 16 years later, working with the big banks and insurers, right? So that's been one hell of a journey, I'm sure. So I know you've worked with deals of different sizes, right? From the mid markets to top enterprise companies today, the big banks today, right? What's the biggest deal that you worked on? Maybe in terms of value, or maybe in terms of generally the biggest deal, or something that's most memorable to you.
Sure. Yeah. So at Salesforce, I closed a multi-million-dollar deal, and it's probably a deal that I was most proud of, and I'll tell you why. When I joined Salesforce for the second time, because I had 2 stints there, I had a great run. I left for a year and came back. I got a chance to cover some of the biggest banks in the country. And I remember the senior VP at Salesforce for one of the products that we were selling. He sat down with me with one of our top accounts. And he told me, listen, Salman, I would suggest you just take down the small deal here. They already spent a lot of money with us. It's going to be too much of a hassle and too much of a challenge to close a bigger deal. Just take down a smaller deal. I took that on as a challenge. And I said, in my head, I was like, no, I came here to close big deals. I didn't come here to close small deals. So over the course of that 9 to 12 months, the team and I uncovered a very large deal with one of the big banks in Canada. We went through, my sales playbook where we uncovered the challenge. We aligned to multiple stakeholders. We helped them understand the cost of not doing anything, and went through multiple cycles and ultimately closed a large deal. And I remember to this day when I closed that deal and the team closed that deal, my team and I, because there's a lot of cross-functional teams involved, the senior VP messaged me and he said, Salman, thank you for not listening to me. Thank you for not listening to me when you took over this account. And I'm like, I remember that day. You told me to go for the small one, and I went for the big one, and we got it. So very proud of that.
That deserves, a strong recognition, and it's great that you got it. So I think you've quite recently started posting a lot of videos, Salman, every day. There's a lot of actionable takeaways. I know you quite recently launched your own sales academy as well. And you constantly talk about discovery calls, doing the right thing, saying the right thing, right? Making a first impression on your discovery call or on your demo, right? What's your favorite thing to do? What's your favorite? Should people do small talk? What's your favorite thing to do? To make that first impression.
So there's nothing wrong with small talk, Anirudh. Absolutely not. Like, yes, you should build a good relationship and connection with your prospect. But here's the thing. If you just kick it off with, hey, how's the weather doing, Linda? How's the weather where you are, Linda? How's it going? Oh, yeah. You sound like every other AE. These folks speak to multiple vendors on a weekly and monthly basis. You want to stand out. So instead of just talking about the weather, why don't kick off the call with this? Hey, Linda, saw that your CEO, invested in mental health resources for your team for this year. That's a great accomplishment. Or, hey, Linda, I saw your Q4 results last month that were released. I'm sure your business unit had a lot to do with it. Kick it off with something that shows them, wow, this person actually did their homework. I guarantee you will stand out big time. And then the second point is, a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't start your discovery with slides. Don't show any slides. I agree with that, but I usually start my discovery calls, especially when there's execs involved, like VP and above. I share one slide. And you know what that slide is? I have one slide with a picture of their CEO or a senior leader on the right side. And on the left side, I'll have a quote of that senior leader or CEO speaking to one of their strategic priorities, something that I uncovered online or whatever. And I'll make sure that that quote we can tie our value to that somehow. And then I'll ask the VP, I'll say, hey, Linda, how does your CEO's priority align to your objectives as VP and how your team supports it? You just taken your discovery call from down here to up here. You're having really high level executive discussions. That's how you do it.
Taking notes all the way. So one of the things that I quite commonly hear, right, at least this is my strong belief, at least 30 to 40% of your deals are won, on your demo calls, right? The connection you make, the rapport you build, the kind of value you bring to the table, right? What's your top three, actionable takeaways for account executives like myself, or people who are possibly working or getting started as an AE? What are your top three for them to do on their demo?
Yeah, totally. So this is something that I do all the time because, I'm an account executive just like everybody else. And this is what I talk to a lot of AEs about. Here are three things that you can do to ensure you progress past the demo stage in a meaningful way and you reduce any risk of your deals falling apart. Because typically deals fall apart. You know this, Anirudh, from your experience. Like deals fall apart sometimes after the demo. Here are 3 things that you can do. Number 1 is clearly understand the problem that you're solving for and the use case of your prospect. One thing that sellers don't do enough of is clearly understanding the use case. Now, what I mean by that is, what is the current process that your prospect is going through today? That's why one of my favorite questions on discovery is to ask the customer, hey, Linda, can you walk me through one of your most common use cases step by step and be as specific as possible? I really want to put my feet in your shoes. And the reason for that is that they'll walk you through that entire process, and then you can unpack it. You can understand the gaps, and then on your demo, you replicate how you can do that process in an easier way. And it will resonate so much with the customer because they're going to appreciate, wow, this person really heard me. Not enough sellers do that. Sellers usually sometimes just focus on the problem. Okay, let's just show a demo. No. You got to really understand what they're going through. Number 2 is make sure on the demo, Anirudh, that you have everyone engaged. But one of the questions I'm not a big fan of that I've heard some people talk about is, why don't you ask something like, when you show a capability, pause and ask them, how does this compare to how you're doing things today? The reason I don't like that question is because you should already know how they're doing things today. So instead of that, once you show the capability, or your SE shows the capability, step in and pause and say, hey, on our last call, you talked about the challenge that you're facing where it's difficult to organize all these projects in one place, and it's difficult to make these decisions because you don't have that full visibility in place. What sort of impact do you think what we just showed you would bring to your business and your role? So ask that question and make sure you call them out by name, every key stakeholder in the demo. Make sure they feel engaged. Because as an AE, you shouldn't be sitting back and relaxing and letting your SE do the demo. You should be engaged. And then the third thing is always lock in that next step. One thing that I do, because I'm telling you, if you don't lock in that next step, you're just going to be bugging and chasing the customer to get an update. Instead, I leave the last few minutes and I'll say, okay, let's lock in the next step. Let's open up our calendars. Let's book 15, 20 minutes right now so we can lock in the next step. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but make sure you lock that in before you end the call.
Sounds good. So the next 2 questions for you, I'm just going to combine these 2 aspects, right? Pretty similar. Again, it's more relevant right now as we near the end of the year. One thing is, what's your go-to strategy? For prospects to have an answer to the why now question, right? That's one aspect of it, because you want to create that sense of urgency. And this is again for me and on behalf of all the AEs. As we are closing down on the year, it's a numbers game. We're going to be chasing down on numbers. What's your advice to anyone who is aiming to finish strong this quarter, this year?
So let me ask your second question first. Well, actually, let me ask the first question first. So the biggest thing that you should understand is, when you reach out to your prospects, I'm telling you, Anirudh, and you know this from your experience, don't just talk about ROI. Oh, we help companies with 37% ROI that go with our platform. At the end of the day, your prospects, they don't really care about your fancy features and capabilities and ROI metrics that you can provide. What they care about are their business problems and how the heck they're going to solve them so they can achieve their metrics and KPIs. So instead, focus on what is the cost of doing nothing. If you do nothing, stay status quo, and you just go with the same processes that you're doing today that's causing your business pain, what is that costing your business from a time perspective, from a cost perspective, from a resource perspective? Focus on that, the cost of doing nothing in action. And one of the most difficult things I found AEs face is that they ask, how do I quantify that impact? I don't know. Well, you quantify that by really understanding what the metric is or the KPI is that your champion or stakeholder cares about, and how is that being impacted. So that's important. And the second point is around your second question around, what should AEs be doing to try to finish the year strong? Here's what I would do. Number one is any deals that you're working on in Q4, because there's some people that have fiscal end at the end of December, ours is the end of January, so a couple of months left. Every deal that you have right now, make sure you Forget this email game. Like, call your prospects and your champions on their cell phone. If you send an email, you might get a response or a day or two. Call them. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call their cell number and ask them the questions. Ask them questions like this. If you're deep in the cycle, what's stopping you from signing this by the end of this week? What obstacles are in the way? Who are you meeting with this week? What is the desired outcome? What's remaining? What are some obstacles in the way that's stopping you from signing? Understand, be proactive, and understand, what the risks are in your deal. That's really, really important, because if you don't get the answers you need, then it might be a fluffy deal, and you don't want to waste your time on fluffy deals.
And qualify them early, right? So one of the things, again, this is something that you quite commonly would have heard from your peers, or you might have come across this quite often, right? I don't have enough pipeline to hit my quota, right? How would Salman personally solve for this issue in case he ever came across something? I'm sure you've had some point in your career that you've faced this as well. What would Salman do in such a situation?
Here's what you should do, because everybody needs pipeline. And the bottom line is, a healthy pipeline solves all problems. And that is so true, I'm telling you. Here's what you do. Let's say you have 50 accounts, and you have 15 of those 50 are existing customers that may have a team or two that's using your platform. A lot of people talk about referrals. Ask your champion if there's anybody across the organization that can leverage your platform as well. You know what you're doing in that case? You're relying on someone else. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but be proactive versus reactive. This is what you do. You understand the teams that are using your platform today in the company. That's great. And then you go out and identify 5 or 6 other VPs or directors at that same company that fit the persona that you sell to, and maybe have a use case that you could potentially solve for. And then you reach out to every VP and director, and you say something like this: hey, Linda, we're actually working with Bob in marketing that's leveraging our platform today, which is enterprise approved, by the way, to solve X, Y, and Z. These are the results that they're seeing. If these problems are something that you're facing today and resonate with you, we're confident that we can replicate this and bring business value to your organization. Would it be worth a chat? You do that across multiple VPs and directors in that same account, I guarantee you will build pipeline, because number one, you're referencing a team in their organizations that's leveraging it. You're telling them your enterprise approved platform. You're talking about problems that resonate. That will help your chances. And the second point is, if you just work with prospects, do that same thing, but reference your industry peers versus that. I'm telling you, do this, you will solve your pipeline worries.
Lovely. One thing that I've noticed, or at least most people on LinkedIn know about you, is you're a huge fan of helping SDRs and AEs, with throughout their sales career, right? Maybe it can be to help them land their next role. It can be anything, right? It can, or you just find, if you have a 30-minute, I'm sure you're going to give it to them to have a quick chat, see what kind of help they need, right? Looking at this as an avenue, what's that one thing? What's that word of advice for you? To the SDRs and AEs out there today that are prospecting. Is there anything specific that you think they should be focusing on in today's modern sales environment?
Yeah, there's a few things that I recommend. And that's a really good question, Anirudh, because it's difficult to sell in this environment now. Here's the thing: the reality is that every executive is deprioritizing projects. They're having a very granular look at all the projects that they're working on, and they're saying what is a priority, what is not a priority, what is a must-have that keeps the lights on, and what is a nice-to-have. And I'm telling you, if you position your platform as a nice-to-have, you're going to have a very difficult time closing deals in this market. So what I would do is ensure that I have a 3 or 4 step, a 4-step prospecting technique that I use. Number one is find something relevant about the organization that your first line in your email, your cold call really aligns to, and do your research, right? Do your research. And there's lots of ways to do that. Number 2 is focus on the problem, not the solution. Like, everybody talks about capabilities. Here's the thing: lack of visibility in manual processes, that's not a problem. I can name 10,000 solutions right now that solve for lack of visibility managing processes. Focus on a specific problem that you solve for, that your key persona is facing today. Like, hey, we have disjointed collaboration tools, which is making it difficult for us to work together. And then focus on what is the value statement that you solve for? What is your value statement that you can solve for this challenge? And a soft call to action. Here's the thing. If your solution cannot help them increase profitability or revenue, decrease costs, or improve EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, you're going to have time selling, because that's what's looking like. Sure, employee engagement is great and all that other stuff. I'm not saying that's not important, but budgets are so tight now. You need to ensure that the value that you bring and the cost of its action is reducing cost, increases in revenue, profitability. Focus on that.
Got it. So in your about over 16 years that you've been in sales, I know you've posted about this earlier. You had you went through that as well, right? Every salesperson does. What do you think would be a downfall, or something that was a turning point for you in your sales career? What's that one thing that you still remember as a fall for you?
I'll tell you exactly what it was, Anirudh. I was put on a PIP earlier in my career. And those that don't know what a PIP is, it's a performance improvement plan. So typically, if AEs aren't doing well, or they're struggling, or haven't hit their number in a while, then you're put on a performance improvement plan that gives you kind of a documented approach of, say, hey, if you don't accomplish these quotas or metrics in 30 days or 60 days, whatever it case may be, then you're going to be let go. So I was put on a PIP early in my career, and that was really hit me hard. It really put a sense of, I questioned myself, Anirudh. I asked myself, is sales even right for me? Like, should I be going on this journey? Like, what am I doing with my life? Maybe I just should have listened to my mom and became a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. But I didn't put my head for too long. What I started doing from that point forward is I started documenting my losses. What could I learn from them? Document my wins. What did I do well? And throughout all these years, I've built the sales playbook. And now I'm teaching others how they can avoid struggling and start succeeding, making more money. So that PIP really hammered it home for me. And the key to it is, yes, sometimes sales is tough. It's full of ups and downs. There's peaks and valleys. And it's tough, but you have to be patient. You have to be resilient and push forward and learn from your downfalls. Push forward. And if you do that, you will be successful. It takes time. It's a journey. It's a marathon.
Yeah. I had a chance to speak with KD in one of my earlier episodes. One thing that I asked him is, hey, what was that one thing that you think didn't go right with your, in your career, or what was that one advice he thought was bullshit that he got from his leaders at when he started out, right? In your experience of these many years that you've been in sales, what do you think that is that one thing that many sales leaders are getting wrong today, right? And that's actually affecting SDRs and AEs in this space.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, and I know this for a fact because it's affected me in the past, not now, because I have a great leadership team at Asana, but in the past, and also some of the AEs and SDRs that I coach today, they've brought this up as well, is that deals take time, especially in this market. I don't care if you're an enterprise AE or mid-market AE, especially enterprise or SDR covering enterprise accounts. It's not easy to get meetings, and deals take time. If a sales leader thinks that if you start covering, let's say, a large enterprise account, and they're expecting you to close the deal in 6 months when there's no relationships, you don't have an MSA in place, there's no approved vendor, that's not going to happen. That's not realistic. Deals take time. You have to uncover the challenge. You have to align to multiple stakeholders. You have to go through security and privacy processes. You have to get an approved vendor, go through legal and MSA. Those take time. And if any sales leader thinks that you're going to close a large enterprise deal in less than 6 months, it's just not realistic. And sometimes some leaders put that pressure on SDRs and AEs to accomplish that. And you know what that tells me? That tells me that sales leader hasn't sold an enterprise deal in their life. So that's that. That's that.
Not sure how many people are going to like hearing that, but appreciate the transparency there, Salman. Talking about sales leader, who's that one person? Who's your favorite sales leader? Anybody that you look up to, or anybody who's been an inspiration for you at your early stages, or even today?
Yeah, yeah, great question. There's a couple that I really admire. There's one individual in particular. His name is Rich Lind. I don't know if he's hearing this, but Rich Lind used to be one of my leaders at Salesforce. He's still a wonderful leader. And the reason I really enjoyed working with him and someone who I respect is that he cared about your well-being, your personal well-being. You know, a lot of leaders talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. He genuinely cares about your well-being, whether it's at work, whether it's with family, personal. And when you have that and feel that, it'll give you the motivation to continue to work with them and continue to, you know, exceed your goals. And that's someone I really, really appreciated.
Great. I know Salman as a man who puts family first, right? God-fearing, amazing human being. What's the one thing that people don't know about Salman?
There's a couple of things. Number one is I was born and raised in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, which is a super, super cold, small town in northern Alberta in Canada, where there wasn't much very diverse. There wasn't diversity at all. There's probably 10 colored families there. There's like 35,000 people. So people, when they look at me, they say, Salman, you were born and raised in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada. I'm like, yep, that's me. One other thing is I'm a fan of older teeny bopper shows. So I don't know if you know, there's some old teeny bopper shows that I was a big fan of that I still watch now. But yeah, those are a couple of, and a big Marvel fan too. So any Marvel flick, a movie that's come out, huge fan of those.
You're going to be there the first day, right?
Yeah.
I think we're down to the last one. This is something that I'm going to use as a finisher. I saved it for the last. What is your bold prediction for sales in 2023? What do you think is going to change? What can people look forward to?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a bit of it today, where you need to position your platform as a must-have versus a nice-to-have. Because, like I said before, Anirudh, executives are deprioritizing projects, and they're tightening budgets, and you need to ensure that your platform is either helping them increase revenue and profit, or decrease cost, or improve in EBITDA, as I mentioned, their stock price. That is so important. And if you can't position your platform that solves problems that executives care about solving, and it's a big enough problem, you're going to struggle, and it's going to be a little difficult. So that's what I think is going to even be more emphasized in 2023 in SaaS sales.
Perfect. That's 13 questions with Salman. I'll see you on the next one.